The Animal Crossing series has been around for a long time, longer than a lot of people realize. The first game, Animal Crossing, was actually a Nintendo 64 game in Japan, but because it was a late Nintendo 64 game, it was then put on the GameCube, given some new features, brought to the US, and put on the GameCube one more time in Japan. Then they went on to release Wild World for the DS and City Folk for the Wii, finally taking the series of 3 games and making it an actual series. And despite all of the releasing, rehashing, and revamping, they never thought to include an alarm clock. Animal Crossing Clock and Animal Crossing Calculator were 2 separate apps released as DSiWare in 2009. They were both $2, meaning for a complete set, you needed $4. You also needed a DSi. The DSi was a weird version of the DS that gave you slightly bigger screens compared to the DS Lite, no GBA cartridge slot, 2 cameras, and most importantly, downloadable games called DSiWare. And while I personally like the DSi more than the DS Lite, I don't think the majority of the Wild World playing public saw the upgrade being worth it. I mean, why buy a new video game system for an alarm clock and a calculator when your phone can already do those things? Well, these apps released at a time when smartphones were still very young. The iPhone was still trying to prove it wasn't a gimmick, while Android phones were still trying to figure out if they were gimmicks. That being said, if you had a flip phone, you probably had an alarm clock and a calculator built in anyway. But there's one thing those alarm clocks can't do: make funny Animal Crossing sounds. Once you've spent your $4, you're greeted with 2 options. You can either start your journey with the calculator or the clock. And the clock is a bit more interesting, so let's start with the calculator. For starters, this is just a calculator. You can hear an Animal Crossing character say the numbers you type in, like in Animal Crossing, and sometimes an Animal Crossing character will show up if you get a certain type of number, like repeating numbers. The calculator also lets you convert things. You can convert miles per hour to kilometers per hour, Celsius to Fahrenheit, animal ages to other animal ages. Maybe they aren't scientific calculators, but they're fun. These are things that appeal to kids. And me. But there isn't really anything unique to Animal Crossing about this calculator. They could have added a turnip calculator for just a little bit of unique flair. But instead, I have to say, it's fine at best. The clock app is a lot more tailor-made for Animal Crossing. The top screen can show the current time as either an analog clock or a digital clock, and the digital clock resembles the one in Wild World, though it's been redesigned a bit. The analog clock looks pretty much the same as the one in City Folk. When you launch the app, you see a nice Animal Crossing background. You have sky, some nice green grass, and a few random characters thrown in the background. The clouds change, the time of day changes, and you can make a town tune that plays when the hour changes. And when you want to set an alarm, you can have it play one of 3 songs. The music for catching a bug, the music that plays at 1 PM in Wild World and City Folk, and the music that plays when Resetti is yelling at you for those days you really need to get out of bed on time. Now for some complaining, the app just doesn't do much. Aside from letting your alarm be 1 PM, there's no hourly music. They could have let you toggle between the music from the GameCube game and City Folk, but instead they chose neither, so it just sits there in absolute silence until the alarm goes off. The app also doesn't celebrate any Animal Crossing events. I set the system to when fireworks are going off in City Folk, and the app didn't care. I tried both Toy Day and Christmas, and not only was there not even jingle in the background, the leaves and the grass were green. It knows what day it is, why isn't there snow? At the end of the day, just add this to the list of reviews that came away from these games pretty negatively. There just isn't enough there to keep me interested, and don't even get me started on the gameplay. In 2013, Nintendo released the successor to City Folk, and the series was back on a handheld, the 3DS. New Leaf brought a lot of new interest to the series, and just a year after the game's launch in Japan, the first spin-off on the system was released there. And then it came out 2 years later in Europe. Photos with Animal Crossing is an app that lets you see Animal Crossing characters in the real world. Just like you can use the AR Games app to see a number of Nintendo characters in the real world. It was a feature that was kinda cool in 2011, and a feature most people forgot about once the 3DS had a solid library of games. This app was somewhat included in the free Animal Crossing New Leaf update, but instead of using AR cards, it uses amiibo cards. And instead of the characters matching the angle of the card, they just kinda float there. It's not a direct one-to-one version of the app, especially since you can't use your own printed cards. But if you want the best experience, you probably want nothing to do with either option. There's a reason people don't remember the AR Games app on the 3DS. It's the kind of thing that looks impressive, but it was really only a tech demo. And then they took that tech demo and put Animal Crossing on it. Yeah, it's a cool tech demo, but you can only show it off so many times before we want to see it do something. As a free thing, it's hard to really complain, and it probably did make someone very happy, but looking at it critically, spending $2 on a clock app is looking scarily appealing right now. The last spin-off we'll be looking at is Animal Crossing Happy Home Designer, a 3DS game that has the sole objective of letting you make houses for Animal Crossing characters. At the time, this was a pretty neat game. It had really nice controls that New Leaf didn't even have, and added the ability to put some furniture on the ceiling. One really nice feature was that animals could interact with a lot of furniture in ways they couldn't in New Leaf. You could make a music hall and animals would sing KK Slider songs. You could put a stove down and they would cook. What brought Happy Home Designer down was a lack of any real objectives. You made houses to make more houses, and that was the game. I also didn't like that most of the furniture had to be obtained by decorating a house that was for an animal that unlocked it. Sorry if a specific couch would be perfect in this house, you need to make someone else a house first. That being said, the furniture restrictions are the only restrictions. You don't have a budget to manage, and the animal you make the house for will always like what you do, as long as you include certain specific furniture. There aren't any rules to follow, you don't even have to stick to a theme. Make the ugliest house imaginable and they'll love you for it anyway, even though all you've given them is a health risk. At least you can make facilities for the animals. Make them a store, a school, and a hospital for when your bad designs catch up to them. New Leaf's Welcome Amiibo update brought a lot of the new features and furniture items from Happy Home Designer into New Leaf. And that was a great way for the two games to feel like brothers instead of one being an awkward stair-step above the other in some ways while still being a totally different game. Unfortunately, the Welcome Amiibo update also made Happy Home Designer almost completely irrelevant. If you wanted to design houses for a bunch of overly gracious animals, this was a fine enough game. If you wanted a game with depth that would give you objectives and obstacles to overcome, this wasn't going to be the game for you. Happy Home Designer was given something of a sequel in the form of Happy Home Paradise, which is paid DLC for Animal Crossing New Horizons on the Switch. It still has a lot of the same flaws, and a few new ones. You can no longer search for furniture while making a house, the controls aren't as easy to use because there's no touchscreen support. I also think the animals in Happy Home Designer have more diverse requests. Happy Home Paradise asks for a lot of gyms, while Happy Home Designer has a lot more specific requests. It's still a big improvement overall though, mostly because there's a lot of furniture that looks really good, and you can adjust room sizes and add walls. It's a solid 5 steps forward and 2 steps back. And as far as spin-offs go, that's about it for Animal Crossing. There's Amiibo Festival on the Wii U, but that ain't portable, so I guess I'm saved from talking about it here. There's also Pocket Camp, but they keep updating that, so anything I say about it will be completely irrelevant in a matter of months. I would know everything I knew about it is completely irrelevant because I haven't gotten into it since March of 2020 for some reason. It's surprising how many spin-offs exist for Animal Crossing, a series most people don't consider to be one of the big Nintendo properties. And while I don't think any of them sold well or pushed the Animal Crossing brand forward, they make the series more interesting to look at, so I'm glad they exist. I'm less glad that I spent a combined $4 on a calculator and clock. The money is worth like $5 today.